Hey folks, welcome back to Nate's favorite deck building games. I am Nathan P. Butler. This is my YouTube channel. We're continuing our look here at the DC deck building game. In our last episode, we took a look at the last so far of those $20 packs, which instead of being a Crisis expansion, was Rivals Batman vs. the Joker, which changed things up from this being a game that is essentially competitive in terms of being the best superhero at defeating supervillains, or the best supervillain at beating superheroes in Forever Evil, or even facing a cooperative challenge through crisis scenarios, to actually being a head-to-head, kick the other guy's ass type of game. And it put Batman versus the Joker, but it was at the time the only thing of its type. Well, I kept that for that episode, and kept one box set until after that episode, specifically because essentially what this is a combination of concepts from Rivals and the regular games. This is the recent release that's very different than the others, entitled Confrontations. Now, you will notice here, it is for 2 to 4 players, not 2 to 5, which is usually the case, and there isn't a solo mode of this one. That is because this is basically like Rivals. It's about knocking out the other side through their different incarnations of given superheroes. The difference is, this is team-based. It can be one-on-one, but it's actually designed to be 2-on-2, using many of the same mechanics we talked about when talking about Rivals. So let's take a look at what's inside the DC Deck Building Game's new Confrontation set. Well, first we're going to need our basics, right? So we have our instruction manual that's going to tell us how this game plays differently than the other regular boxed sets for the game. And then we have some things that are now included in each set to help make use of the multiverse box, which we're going to look at in a later episode here. You have a randomizer card for Confrontations and a divider, a plastic divider for Confrontations. These will be of use with the multiverse box for storage and for the multiverse game mode, but we'll talk more about that later. Just know that all sets released after the box itself, the multiverse box, are going to come with these types of things to help you organize. We then have our oversized superheroes, but this time it's a little bit different. We have 4 different superheroes included: Aquaman, Zatanna Zatara, Wonder Woman, and Superman. And in each case, just like with Rivals with Batman and Joker, we're being given 3 different versions. Cost of 9, 12, and 15 to defeat them. And they work similarly in that we have 4 and 6 victory points available from the first 2, and the last incarnation says you win instead. The biggest difference is that in order to be able to sort through this set and integrate it with something like Rivals, they actually give you a little notation on each one that gives you their hero symbol, says superhero, and then says level 1, level 2, or level 3 underneath it as a new type of notation. But this is basically going to be a game where you have superheroes on one side, supervillains on the other side, and your goal is to go after the superhero or supervillain on the other side, just like Batman going after Joker and vice versa in Rivals. But what will happen essentially is you will always attack the lowest numbered, 9, 12, or 15, the lowest cost hero on the opposite side. So you take out a 9, then you take out a 9, you take out a 12, then you take out a 12. And then when you take out the first of the 15 cost heroes on the other side, or villains on the other side, you win. You don't actually take out both on the side. Essentially, you have 2 pairs of characters going at it, and when one is defeated or dies, in theory, on the opposite side, you've won, essentially forcing the other character into retreat. But these are our superheroes. Who do we have for our supervillains? Well, you have supervillains that make sense for our heroes. For Superman, we have Lex Luthor, right? For Zatanna, we have Felix Faust. For Aquaman, we have Ocean Master. For Wonder Woman, we have Cersei. And yes, I recognize that for Aquaman, I had the 15 and 12, I think, flipped, but I'm not going to say it all again, so just bear with that if you even noticed it. But again, the idea being that we have 3 different levels of each. Each one has a level 1, level 2, level 3 designator, different victory point amounts until you get to the you win, and it is 9, 12, 15 in each case. And again, yes, you can swap in Batman and Joker. There are rules in the rulebook for how to do that to integrate Rivals with this. It's really the one thing that Rivals really integrates well with. Now we'll have our starting decks of 7 punch cards and 3 vulnerability cards, and as you would expect, as is the case with most of the sets, we wind up seeing slightly new designs for them, although they do the same thing. This time though, we're given 14 punch cards with a design specific to the villains, and then we have 14 punch cards with a design specific to the heroes, the idea being that you play with the one that makes the most sense for your side. Same thing with your 3 vulnerabilities for each starting deck. So we have our vulnerability cards for the supervillains and our vulnerability cards for the superheroes. Again, they do the same thing, vulnerability having no effect and punch having a +1 power. The whole idea, though, of different designs for heroes or villains isn't the case for our always available cards that are sitting out. There will be no supervillain stack, but we're going to need weaknesses and something to replace kicks rather than kicks themselves this time. So our weakness cards, we have 16 of them, and they just have a slightly new design, but they work the exact same way as weakness cards always do. And then instead of a kick that would give you 2 power for a cost of 3, instead we have a new card called Enhanced Strength. Still a cost of 3, but instead of being orange, it is yellow. It goes basically where the kicks would go. Instead of giving you 2 power, it can give you 2, but not always. It says Assist. We'll talk about the assist keyword momentarily. +1 power. If you played this from your hand, which is a key, your hand, additional +1 power. So if you're playing this from your hand, yeah, it's 2, just like a kick would be. But not always, because there are circumstances where you might not be playing this from your hand. It's called Enhanced Strength. First time we've ever seen it, only time thus far that we've seen it. Then we have 108 new cards for our main deck. Bear in mind again that while we do have some villains in here, of course, we do not have any supervillains for this set because you're going after the other side, not supervillains from the supervillain stack. If you're a superhero, you're going after supervillains, but it's the oversized ones represented by the other players, not a stack. So we have our nice big stack of new main deck cards, and just like with Rivals, if you wind up running the main deck down to the point where you got to refill the lineup and you can't, then whichever has the most victory points on either side wins. It's a combined total from the 2 players on both sides if you are playing a 2-on-2 game, but otherwise it's all about knocking out the first of the 3rd tier version of either of the heroes or villains represented by the players on either side. As for turn order, it doesn't necessarily go around the table. Instead, we have these turn markers, red for supervillain, blue for superheroes. They really like that whole dichotomy aspect. And basically, you've got one side that's the even number, one side is the odd number. First player sits across from the second, third player sits across from the fourth, and it basically goes in the order of the tokens, 1, 2, 3, 4, rather than relying on where you sit and either going clockwise or counterclockwise or anything like that most games would use. Why we actually need these turn tokens, I don't think they're really necessary, but there's something else to help you remember what order you go in, just in case you sit kind of funky most of the time. Now again, it pretty much works like Rivals does. On a regular turn, you just play the cards, you acquire cards from the lineup, and you just keep going and going that way. But when you feel as though you're probably going to have enough in your hand, or with other cards you might draw because of cards in your hand, that you think you could take out one of the heroes or villains on the other side, as represented by their current character card out of the 3, for either of your opponents, that's when you declare a confrontation. But if you declare a confrontation, no, regardless of what happens, you cannot acquire any cards from the lineup during that turn. Instead, you play all the cards you possibly can to build up as much power as possible, and once you've done that, the other side then plays any block cards or cards they want to play to, again, try to help build up their defense as much as possible, and if the opponent who's attacking still has more power than the defense rating, again, 9, 12, or 15, or whatever the block turns it into, of the player on the other side, then the player on the other side winds up losing. That card goes into the victory stack for the opposing team, and they move on to the next incarnation of their hero, unless it was their last incarnation of the hero, in which case the attacking team automatically wins. Basically the same thing as Rivals, you're just dealing with the choice of 2 different opponents and always have to go for the lowest cost one first. You can't just go 9, 12, 15, say if you got a team of player 1 and player 3, You can't just go after player 3 and knock out all 3 of theirs in a row. You have to take out 9, 9, and then, either 12 or 12, and then take out the other 12 and keep going and going and going. But you only have to defeat 1 with the 15 cost. Again, let's talk about keywords, because that's really the only other thing that makes this a particularly unique set. As always, we have attack and defense. Attack is something that happens when you play the card that goes after the other players, unless it tells you a specific other player to go after. In this case, going after your opponents is the general sense of these. And if somebody doesn't attack, you can use a card with a defense keyword to basically come out and stop that attack from having its effect. So attack and defense work like it does in a normal game. You also have that block ability, which is something back from Rivals again. If someone's attacking you in a confrontation, block will allow you to generally do something to help increase your odds of withstanding that attack. Again though, it's only used in a confrontation. There may be other card information that you could play on other turns, but anything with block is confrontation only. Also confrontation only is keyword confrontation, something you can do only when a confrontation is active. You also sometimes have confrontation attack, which just means it's an attack that can only happen during a confrontation, but otherwise works like a regular attack. Then you also have this assist keyword. Assist is a little bit different. And remember, it's also on enhanced strength. Assist is basically the idea that it's a card that you can play on your turn, or you can play it on the other player's turn. That is, the other player on your team. So let's say it's player 1's turn, but player 3 realizes they can really use that +2 power and the ability to put their deck into their discard pile for one reason or another. So on player 1's turn, player 3 plays this, thanks to the assist keyword. The abilities all essentially get transferred over to the other player, and they act as if they played the card. However, you don't get credit for essentially playing a card of that particular type. So for instance, if it says, well, you get credit for every hero that you play, well, you weren't the one who played the card. You get all the effects as if you did, but you weren't the one who actually played it, so you don't get that benefit. Same thing with abilities on the superhero or supervillain cards that give you some kind of credit for what cards you played. The other player still played it, but all the effects are happening for you instead of them. And when the turn is over, it goes into that player's discard pile without drawing a replacement card. The only other thing I would point out with these cards is that if you look over on the side, unlike most sets, there's a little symbol there. In this case, the Aquaman symbol, in this case, the Lex Luthor symbol, and so forth. The idea there is that if you're basically trying to go through and combine this set with others, and you want to take out certain superheroes or supervillains, and then mix it in, say, with Rivals for Batman or Joker, then this lets you easily figure out which of these are designed to work with which specific superheroes or supervillains to help you pull out specific cards to replace them with other cards, rather than just doing a straight combination. So a cool new way of playing the DC deck building game, either as a one-on-one game similar to Rivals where you're controlling multiple superheroes, or playing it as a two-on-two game as designed. But it is fully competitive. It very much sort of breaks the notion of the original game down into something a little more like Rivals, as not necessarily going to be for everybody. And because its nature is competitive, there is no solo mode for this game. But if you're interested in another new way to play the DC deck building game, and you like the idea of playing on teams, especially 2-on-2, then definitely check out Confrontations. It's worth a look, but it's not going to be for everybody, and it is not something quite as easily integrated with other sets as combining the other big sets would be. Confrontations looks like a regular big set, but it's not. Be warned, but have fun.